Okay, everybody, it's me, Gregory Mannarino. This is my post-market wrap-up for this lovely Monday. What a crazy Monday this was. Monday, July 13th, 2020. So let us converse. What happened? We had a stock market off to the races today. A rally across the board. Well, what happened? If you were looking at crude oil, you knew exactly what happened. And I cover this all the time. I explain to you how important crude oil is to this entire market. All right. Stocks were in rally mode. Crude was catching a bid after being negative. Then all of a sudden, OPEC comes out talking about curbing their production cuts moving forward. All of a sudden, crude reverses, drops over 2%. Bam! Down comes the stock market. So the Dow did put on a fractional gain. NASDAQ and S&P 500 did put on slight losses. Nothing major. But again, this is a clear example, or should be to you, how important crude oil is. Crude oil is what? The lifeblood of the military industrial complex. Period. The end. That's what it is. Wake up if you don't already know that. Let's talk about a few other things. Cryptocurrencies were up nicely at one point. They ended up flat to down. Gold ended up with a slight gain, and silver put on like 2%. 10-year yield came down a little bit, 0.63. You know what? I don't know what the dollar did. Bear with me a second. Let me check this real quick. The dollar, or the lovely dollar, should I say, did this. All right, dollar had a fractional loss. All right. So here's the story to me. All right. I would not be surprised to see this market higher tomorrow. This is when the market gets a kind of a shot across the bow like this with what OPEC just did. It sometimes it's got to digest what it heard. And again, the pawns are still in place for this market to move up. I explained to you the one missing link, okay, in the previous video was crude oil. And it had proven to be 100% true. Again, crude must be bid higher. Crude must be propped up. You understand? Just in the same manner, understand that debt must be borrowed into existence in perpetuity just to keep the environment we are in from falling through the floor, from cratering. Same with crude oil. Crude oil must constantly be bid up in this fake environment because it's the lifeblood of the military-industrial complex that is relying on the price of crude oil. The major banks, people, I'm going to say this again for the gazillionth time. The investment banks are so invested and so over-leveraged in crude oil. I can't even begin to explain this to you. So the banks being the core of the military-industrial complex because they finance everything, they want crude bid higher. So what does this mean in the grand scheme of things? If crude does fall under more pressure or whatever, what are they going to do? Let's see. Sink a ship carrying crude oil or bomb it. They'll start a refinery fire. We'll hear about unrest in the Middle East. You know, it's the usual story. It's always the same. And they drag the people right along with it. It's crazy. But that's the way it is. So we heard from our lovely friend Larry Kudlow today. Okay. And Larry Kudlow is talking about more stimulus, more money. Let me ask you while we're here face to face, where do you think Larry Kudlow is going to go to beg for the money? Exactly. Wow, the Federal freaking Reserve. We're broke. America, sadly, the most indebted nation in the history of the world, and we need to borrow more. Larry Kudlow, one of the president's henchmen, must borrow more. That's this whole thing. It's debt-based. You know that. Now, being that we understand that, being that you know that the Fed is going to inflate and inflate and inflate, because this is their end game, this is their goal, what should you be doing? Exactly. Betting against the debt, becoming your own central bank. We just found out that our budget deficit last month was larger than the entire of last year. Now, I know for a fact that you are not surprised about that. Why? Because I've explained to you since time immemorial that debts and deficits are going to explode, and we haven't seen anything yet. If you think this was bad, you haven't seen anything yet. Exponentially higher. That's debts and deficits have no place to go but to blow up. Period. Just like the Federal Reserve's balance sheet. Okay, there's a bunch of people out there, and it just drives me nuts. Go look at the Federal Reserve's balance sheet. Go to their website, federalreserve.gov, Fed balance sheet, and you can see what it looks like. You know, up, parabolic, little kind of a dip down, and I'm talking like fractional, and everyone's saying, oh, the Fed, they're unloading their balance sheet. That's it. It's all over. No. If you think that's what's going on here, then you have no idea of what's going on here. The Federal Reserve is going to inflate much more. Look, their balance sheet is what, about $7 trillion right now? My guess, the Federal Reserve is going to be $21 trillion in a relatively short period of time. And again, the larger the Federal Reserve inflates its balance sheet, at least the one we can see, I'll talk more about that in a second, the higher stocks are going to go. And you must know, everybody who is in the know that understands how the Federal Reserve works. Ask Jim Grant. Okay, Jim Grant is the Federal Reserve watcher. Jim Grant knows for a fact, he's mentioned it actually a few times, that the Federal Reserve has two balance sheets. Okay, so the second balance sheet, the one that you're not allowed to see, the off-balance sheet expenses in the trillions upon multiple trillions, like you can't even believe. I mean, no one has any idea of what's really in there at this particular time. And no one's allowed to know. The only people who have the ability to see the Federal Reserve's hidden balance sheet are Fed presidents. That's it. Not even the President of the United States can see that balance sheet. That's why the Fed will never be audited. You don't understand. If you believe that the Fed, we got to audit the Fed, we got to do this to the Fed, then you don't understand who's running the show. The Federal Reserve can do whatever it wants, whenever it wants. Who do you think, if you had to pick one institution on earth that finances wars all over the world, and those funds would be on their second hidden balance sheet, who would it be? I think I just gave you a big clue. It would be the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve can make loans to anyone, any nation, any cause, at any time. At any time. The Federal Reserve can literally finance terrorism if they want to. You won't be able to know about it, but they can do it. And do you have any doubt? Let me see, with a show of hands. How many of you believe that the Federal Reserve finances terrorism? Yeah, exactly. The Federal Reserve, without a doubt, finances terrorism. They're actually, what the Fed is doing now is a terrorist act by taking over the entire world, by shutting down the global economy via the scamdemic. This was the Fed who deliberately shut down the entire world economy to kill the money velocity so they could get in here and finish their over century-long plan. You see, look, they're tired of waiting. The Federal Reserve was tired of waiting, so they used an opportunity here, okay, to shut down the world. Not just one nation or two, but the world, so they can finish their final solution, their end game to become the lender, buyer of last resort, so they can own it all. Okay, this was a Federal Reserve black op. That's what this was. It wasn't China that released the virus. It wasn't the American government. I know a lot of people think it was the American government. This was the Federal Reserve, who's not part of the government, who engineered this entire scam on the world so they can finish their final solution. I want you to think about it. That's what you are in the middle of right now. Period. The end. And I think you get it. All right, look, I think this video has been important as usual. Please share it. Please get it out there. We got to get more people to understand this stuff. That's the only chance that we have to make any difference. There is strength in numbers. We need more people. Like take this video, for example. Share it on all your social networks. I know a lot of you have a lot of social networks. Share it. Get it out there. Let people hear these things. Let them understand these concepts. And I think once they hear it, and something's just got to click, and it goes, whoa, this is completely logical, because everything this guy says, seems to be coming true. And it is. All right, look. That's it yet again, people. I love you a lot. I mean that. You're all part of my team. I want to make this team a lot bigger. And I'm counting on you to help me, because I will never let you down. And I hope you won't let me down either. And share all my work, share my videos, and together again, people, we can and will make a difference. That's it. All right. See you in the morning. I'm out here.